𝗀𝗵𝗃 is an angry and disappointed man. The documents on his table tell the tale of an intense battle with his now former employer. At its heart, a mandatory vaccination policy that 𝗀𝗵𝗃 refused to submit to.
This is my body. This is my body. This doesn't belong to the government, doesn't belong to them. I make the decisions for my body.
𝗀𝗵𝗃 lives in the Vaal Triangle south of Joburg and had been working for a security company. A workplace vaccine policy came into effect in October last year. And while 𝗀𝗵𝗃 refused to get the jab, he was initially allowed to have regular PCR tests instead. But 3 weeks later, he was told he was no longer welcome. Feeling unfairly treated, he turned to the Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration, but lost his case. Gideon's case is one of two landmark rulings by the CCMA in the past few weeks that has sparked intense debate around mandatory vaccinations and the right of employers to retrench workers who refuse to be vaccinated. In both cases, the employers won. And this has put the cat among the pigeons. Not only is the public divided on the issue, but legal experts and labor lawyers also seem to be polarized. Many labor lawyers say the CCMA got it right, but others, like 𝗀𝗃𝗵𝗶, say the rulings don't reflect what we know about the virus, particularly Omicron.
Vaccinated people can contract and transmit COVID just as well as unvaccinated. So if you're going to dismiss unvaccinated employees because they can contract and transmit COVID, then you need to dismiss equally those who are vaccinated in terms of equity and non-discrimination.
It's widely accepted that vaccinated people can still catch Omicron and infect others, and several studies, such as this one from the University of Copenhagen, found the same. So, if vaccines don't stop the spread of the virus, why insist on a mandatory workplace policy? Well, because the science is complex, and according to Wits vaccinology professor 𝗬𝗵𝗶𝘀, vaccines still offer significant benefits.
People that are vaccinated, firstly, they are less likely to be infected and they're less likely to transmit the virus. Even with Omicron, people that are vaccinated, they shed the live virus for a shorter period of time, which means that even though they might start off with as high a viral load as an unvaccinated individual that wasn't previously infected, the duration of time that they would be infectious will probably be less than an unvaccinated individual.
In other words, unvaccinated employees still pose a greater threat than their vaccinated colleagues because they're infectious for longer and risk exposing the immunocompromised and elderly in particular to severe disease. But what of emerging evidence suggesting Omicron is much less severe than earlier strains of the virus? Death rates are down in many parts of the globe, but the World Health Organization maintains the virus is still hospitalizing and in some cases killing many of the people it infects. For example, recent South African stats show Omicron was still claiming lives.
When we see who ends up in hospital, it's unvaccinated people who's ending up dying. 85% of people that are ending up in hospital that are dying in South Africa are unvaccinated or inadequately vaccinated.
The potential of severe disease altered the rationale for vaccination. The initial clinical trials tested against earlier strains showed the jabs were up to 95% effective at preventing symptomatic infection. Then came Omicron, and that figure plummeted to around 50%, even less for some vaccines.
It's no longer about protecting against infection. It's really about protecting against severe disease and death. We need to do everything that's possible in that work environment to ensure the safety of everyone in that work environment rather than just prioritizing the preferences of a single individual. And the way to ensure the safety of everyone in the environment as best as we can is to get everyone vaccinated.
Despite its complexity and controversy, in June last year, new occupational health and safety directives were introduced allowing for mandatory vaccinations. They came months before the arrival of Omicron. The amended regulations published by government last year do not compel an employer to institute mandatory vaccinations. It merely makes an allowance for mandatory vaccinations should an employer feel that is the correct approach. And it seems many employers feel it is. Gerard Kriel was headhunted as the CEO of a prominent agricultural organization.
I was found to be the best candidate, and an appointment was made during December, and I started working the beginning of January 2022 in Pretoria.
But after just 3 weeks, the chairman of the board called him to a guest house and told him the company had a mandatory vaccination policy and that he had to comply.
Yeah, so we had a discussion on the Thursday evening at the guest house, and I was told to make a decision by the next day whether I'm going to get vaccinated or not. And then the next day the chairman said, okay, it's Friday, this is a quick discussion that you should be having with your wife. These discussions do not take long, so by Saturday you need to call me and tell me what your decision is.
He refused. And just 2 weeks later, he was barred from his office and then suspended. Refusing to walk away, he's taken the company to court. 𝗀𝗏𝗃 is arguing that his constitutional rights have been violated, an opinion he shares with many others hot under the collar about mandates.
This is not about mandatory vaccination, Mac. This is about constitutional rights. They are hard-earned, hard-fought-for rights. Your freedom of association, freedom of movement, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, belief, and opinion. Your right to choose, freedom to choose, and right to decide what goes into your body. Those are constitutional freedoms, and this is what the fight is about.
And across the globe, people who feel their rights are being trampled are taking the fight to their governments, with protests erupting in countries as far afield as Canada and New Zealand. When the American government tried to make vaccination compulsory for employees of larger companies, the Supreme Court ruled against it. Here, the debate is just as fierce and divisive. Towards the middle of last month, students at several universities protested against planned mandates at their campuses. Many, such as those making their voices heard at the University of the Free State, were arrested. In this whole debate, the Constitution seems to feature quite prominently. But to get some clarity on this matter, we decided to come to Cape Town and speak to a constitutional law expert. That's Professor 𝗶𝗶𝘶, who lectures at the University of Cape Town. He argues that even fundamental constitutional rights such as bodily integrity and freedom of choice aren't absolute and can be limited at times.
You balance different interests. My individual personal interest versus the interest and the safety and the health of the entire society. Yeah.
Because you see, that's where the conundrum is, right? Because what are the principles around that?
So it's all about proportionality. So the more important the purpose of the vaccination is, saving lives, reducing spread, and whatever, the more likely it is that the court will say it's proportionate to actually impose a vaccine mandate.
It's a view shared by the Human Rights Commission. Towards the end of last year, it said it would be constitutionally permissible to require people to vaccinate. But uncertainty remains. Both the constitutionality of the government-approved mandates and the 𝗀𝗵𝗵𝗶 rulings haven't been tested in court. And with both sides in the debate standing their ground, it's likely the country's highest court will have the ultimate say.
It will be surprising if one of these cases do not get all the way to the Constitutional Court. The important thing that people who think about this must remember, though, is that the court will weigh up the interest, but they will rely on the verifiable medical evidence. They will not rely on Facebook posts that has nothing to do with the actual medical evidence.
And that evidence will have to cover all the medical objections to mandatory vaccines, including claims that they have the potential to cause harm. Prof, you still have many people that fear the detrimental side effects of being vaccinated. Are these fears ungrounded because it's people's reality?
There are some side effects, and there are some fatal side effects, right? But the magnitude of that is in the region of perhaps 1 out of every 250,000, 4 in a million. Right, at the worst case scenario. We've got a greater risk of dying in South Africa because of a lightning strike than actually dying because of being vaccinated.
The controversy around mandatory vaccinations in the workplace is raging on in South Africa at the moment, and only the courts will be able to clarify matters. And while the courts will end the legal uncertainty around mandatory vaccinations, the futures of those who refuse the jab are anything but. People like Gideon, who rightly or wrongly took a stand, now bear the consequences.
I would be able to still survive, I think, about, with my current savings and what, for about 2 months, and that would be about it, I think.